2 years, 4 months, and 11 days. That was the official tally. Maya kept it logged in a secret, protected part of her mind, a place cordoned off with warning signs and emotional biohazard tape. It was the precise length of time she had been in love with her best friend, Chloe. It was also the precise length of a sentence she was serving, a self-imposed exile in the closest possible proximity to the one person who made the world feel both impossibly vast and small enough to hold in her hands. The irony was a blade she had learned to live with, a dull, constant ache just beneath her ribs. Sometimes, when Chloe laughed, a real, unburdened sound that filled their small apartment with light, the blade would twist, sharp and sudden, a breathtaking reminder of all she could not have. Tonight was one of those nights. The blade was not just twisting, it was carving intricate, painful patterns into her soul. Chloe was curled on the opposite end of their worn, gray sofa, a patchwork quilt pulled up to her chin. Her phone was clutched in her hand, a small, unforgiving rectangle of light illuminating the frustration etched onto her features. She was texting Liam. Again. The staccato tap-tap-tap of her thumbs against the screen was the only sound in the room, a frantic Morse code signaling a distress Maya was uniquely qualified and uniquely tortured to receive. He just doesn't get it, Chloe sighed, the sound heavy with a familiar weariness. She tossed the phone onto the cushion beside her as if it were contaminated. It's like we're speaking two completely different languages. I say I need support, and he hears that I want him to fix it. I say I want to talk about my day, and he thinks it's an invitation to list all the ways I could have handled it better. Maya's heart did its usual, traitorous gymnastics routine. It plummeted with sympathy for her friend's pain and soared with a selfish, ugly flicker of hope. She squashed the hope immediately, tamping it down like a stray ember before it could catch fire. Her role was clear, defined by years of careful practice. She was the supportive friend, the sounding board, the safe harbor in the endless storm of Chloe's romantic entanglements. It was a role she had perfected, a mask she wore so well she sometimes forgot it was there, until a moment like this stripped it away and left her feeling raw and exposed. "I'm sorry, Chloe," she said, her voice soft, practiced. She had said these words, or variations of them, more times than she could count. They felt thin and inadequate, a worn-out blanket offered against a blizzard. What happened this time? Chloe shifted, pulling her knees up to her chest and wrapping her arms around them. The movement made her seem smaller, more vulnerable. It was this version of Chloe, the one stripped of her usual bright, charismatic armor, that Maya found most difficult to resist. The world saw Chloe as a whirlwind of confident energy, all brilliant smiles and easy laughter. But Maya knew the quiet, uncertain currents that ran beneath the surface. She was the sole cartographer of Chloe's hidden emotional landscapes. "It's the gallery thing," Chloe mumbled into her knees. "I told him how nervous I was about the opening next month, how I feel like a total imposter, and that my new series is probably pretentious garbage." She took a deep breath. And he said, "Well, you just have to be more confident. Fake it till you make it, as if it's a switch I can just flip. As if my feelings are an inconvenience to be managed instead of something to be held. I would hold them," Maya's mind screamed. "I would hold them so carefully. I would build a fortress around them." She said none of this, of course. Instead, she offered the carefully curated, friend-approved response. "He's a man, Chloe. They're problem solvers. He probably thinks he's helping. It was a weak defense, and they both knew it. But it was part of the script, the well-rehearsed play they performed every few weeks." Chloe looked up, her wide, hazel eyes that held flecks of gold that shimmered like trapped sunlight, finding Maya's across the expanse of the sofa. The space between them felt like a canyon. "But that's not what I need," she whispered, and the sound was so fragile it seemed to crack the air. "I don't need a problem solver. I don't know. I need someone to just sit in the garbage with me for a minute. To say, yeah, this feels scary, but I'm here. The words echoed in the space between them, a perfect, painful summation of Maya's entire existence. She was always here. She was the constant, the fixed point in Chloe's chaotic orbit. While boyfriends came and went, Liam being the latest and longest lasting in a string of disappointments, Maya remained. She was the one who was there with tea after a bad day, with ice cream after a breakup, with meticulously organized notes before a big exam. She was the foundation upon which Chloe built her life, and like all foundations, she was utterly taken for granted. Not out of malice, but out of the simple, unthinking certainty that she would always be there, solid and unseen. Maya offered a small, sad smile. Your series isn't garbage, you know. It's brilliant. The way you use light and shadow to talk about memory, it's breathtaking. This, at least, was the unvarnished truth. Maya could talk about Chloe's art for hours. She saw the pieces of Chloe's soul that she tucked into every brushstroke, every carefully chosen color. She saw the vulnerability and the strength, the questions and the quiet defiance. She saw Chloe. A real smile, small but genuine, finally touched Chloe's lips. It was like the sun breaking through clouds. You always know what to say. She unfolded herself and padded over to the kitchen, the worn floorboards creaking under her feet. Tea? I'm making chamomile. The everything is secretly falling apart, but let's pretend it's fine. Blend. Maya nodded, a lump forming in her throat. Please, she watched Chloe move around their small, shared kitchen, her motions familiar and comforting. It was a domesticity that felt achingly real, a counterfeit of the life Maya secretly yearned for. They were a we in every practical sense. They shared bills, grocery lists, and the mundane intimacies of cohabitation. They knew each other's coffee orders, laundry habits, and tells for when a bad mood was brewing. They had built a life together, a perfect platonic partnership that was, for Maya, a beautiful, gilded cage. Chloe returned with 2 steaming mugs, the fragrant scent of chamomile and honey filling the air. She didn't return to her end of the sofa. Instead, she sat closer, close enough that Maya could feel the warmth radiating from her, close enough that their knees were almost touching. The proximity sent a jolt of pure, unadulterated electricity through Maya's veins. It was a dangerous, addictive current she had learned to crave and fear in equal measure. Every nerve ending in her body was suddenly on high alert, cataloging the faint scent of Chloe's vanilla lotion, the soft texture of her oversized sweater, the way a stray strand of her auburn hair curled just behind her ear. Sometimes, Chloe said, her voice barely above a whisper as she stared into her mug, I just feel like something is missing. You know? Like I'm following a blueprint for a life that someone else designed, and I'm just going through the motions. I have the good job, the nice boyfriend, the cool apartment. It should all add up. But it doesn't. She finally looked at Maya, her gaze so direct and searching that Maya felt pinned in place. Does that make any sense? It made a terrifying amount of sense. It was the secret hope that Maya harbored, the one she ruthlessly suppressed. The hope that Chloe would one day realize the missing piece wasn't a what, but a who. And that who was sitting right next to her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Maya took a slow, careful sip of her tea, using the moment to compose her features into a mask of thoughtful concern. I think everyone feels like that sometimes, she said, her voice miraculously steady. Like we're all just playing a part we were handed. Chloe was silent for a long moment, her eyes never leaving Maya's. The intensity of her focus was unnerving. It felt different from their usual conversations. It felt heavier, charged, as if the air itself had grown thick with unspoken things. But what if you don't want to play the part anymore? Chloe asked, her voice small and laced with a profound, aching vulnerability. What if you want to write your own lines? The question hung between them, a fragile, shimmering thing. It was a test, a plea, an opening. And Maya, in her designated role as the supportive friend, knew exactly what she was supposed to say. She was supposed to offer encouragement, to tell Chloe she was strong and capable of changing her life, to support her relationship with Liam or her decision to end it. She was supposed to be a mirror, reflecting Chloe's own strength back at her. But for the first time in 2 years, for months and 11 days, the right words wouldn't come. All she could think was, write me in. Please, just write me into your story. The thought was so loud, so desperate, it was a miracle Chloe couldn't hear it. The silence stretched, and Maya knew she had to break it, had to say something safe, something that would gently guide them back to the familiar shores of their friendship. But the silence had a weight of its own now, and in it, something was shifting. The tectonic plates of their relationship were groaning, moving under the pressure of years of unspoken feelings, and Maya was terrified of the earthquake that was to come. She just sat there, clutching her warm mug, feeling the chasm between what she was and what she wanted to be widen into an impassable gulf. And for the first time, she had the terrifying premonition that they were standing on the edge of a cliff, and the ground was starting to crumble beneath their feet. The breaking point arrived a week later, not with a dramatic explosion, but with the quiet, devastating finality of a door clicking shut. It was nearly 2 in the morning on a Tuesday, and the sound of a key fumbling in the lock startled Maya from a light, restless sleep. She sat up in bed, her heart instantly pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Chloe wasn't supposed to be home. She was at Liam's, a fact that had left Maya's side of the apartment feeling cavernously empty and cold. The apartment door opened and closed with a soft thud. Maya held her breath, listening. There were no footsteps, just a profound, unnerving silence. Slipping out of bed, her bare feet silent on the cool wood floor, she crept toward her bedroom door and eased it open a crack. In the dim light filtering in from the streetlights outside, she saw a shape huddled on the floor just inside the entrance. It was Chloe, her back pressed against the door, her knees drawn up to her chest, her face buried in her arms. A small suitcase lay on its side next to her, a silent testament to a severing. Maya's carefully constructed walls of friendly detachment crumbled to dust. The sight of Chloe, so utterly broken and alone, was a physical blow. She forgot her role, forgot the script, forgot the 2 years of practiced restraint. She crossed the living room in 3 quick strides and knelt on the floor in front of her. "Chloe," she whispered, her voice thick with sleep and concern. "Hey, what's wrong? What happened?" Chloe lifted her head slowly, and even in the gloom, Maya could see the glistening tracks of tears on her cheeks. Her eyes were red-rimmed and hollowed out, her expression one of complete desolation. She didn't speak. She just looked at Maya, a raw, silent plea in her gaze. And then she did something that shattered the last vestiges of their established dynamic. She leaned forward and collapsed against Maya, her arms wrapping tightly around Maya's neck, her face pressing into the crook of her shoulder. Her body was racked with silent, shuddering sobs. Instinct took over. Maya wrapped her arms around Chloe's trembling frame, holding her tightly. She could feel the sharp, bony edges of Chloe's spine, the frantic beat of her heart against her own. She murmured soft, soothing nonsense, the kind of gentle sounds one makes to comfort a frightened animal or a small child. She stroked her hair, its silky texture familiar under her palm, and held on as if she could absorb Chloe's pain into herself. They stayed like that for a long time, 2 figures huddled together in the pre-dawn darkness of their apartment, the world outside silent and asleep. Finally, the shudders subsided, replaced by the occasional, hitching breath. Chloe pulled back just enough to look at Maya, her face tear-stained and pale. "It's over," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Liam and I." "It's really over, okay," Maya said softly, her thumb gently wiping a stray tear from Chloe's cheek. The contact was electric, a small, intimate gesture that felt both profoundly natural and shockingly illicit. "Okay, let's get you up." "You're freezing." She helped Chloe to her feet, her arm wrapped securely around her waist. Chloe leaned on her heavily, as if all her strength had been spent. Maya guided her past her own bedroom door, toward the small sanctuary of Chloe's room at the end of the hall. But Chloe stopped, her feet planting on the floor. "No," she said, her voice barely audible. I can't be in there alone right now." She looked at Maya's open bedroom door, then back at Maya, her eyes wide and pleading. "Can I?" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. It was a request that went far beyond simple comfort. It was a redrawing of boundaries, a step into uncharted territory. For a split second, Maya's mind raced with all the reasons she should say no. It was dangerous. It was reckless. It would feed the very hope she had worked so hard to starve. Having Chloe in her bed, a place that had been the silent witness to so many of her lonely, secret longings, felt like a special kind of cruelty, a temptation she wasn't sure she could withstand. It would be like inviting a fire to a house made of kindling. But then she looked at Chloe's face, at the raw vulnerability and the deep, desperate need for comfort etched there, and all of her self-preservation evaporated. She couldn't say no. She wouldn't. The risk of her own heartbreak felt insignificant compared to the certainty of Chloe's. Of course, Maya heard herself say, the words feeling as though they were spoken by someone else, someone braver and far more foolish than she was. Come on, she led Chloe into her room and pulled back the covers of her bed. The room was small, filled with books and the scent of lavender and old paper. It was Maya's space, a reflection of her quiet, internal world. Inviting Chloe into it felt like bearing a part of her soul. Chloe slipped under the covers without a word, curling into a tight ball on the far side of the mattress, her back to the center. Maya hesitated for a moment, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. Then, she walked around to the other side and slid into bed, maintaining a careful, respectful distance between them. The silence in the room was absolute, yet it was filled with the sound of their breathing, the rustle of the sheets, the frantic thumping of Maya's own heart. She lay on her back, staring up at the ceiling, every cell in her body acutely aware of Chloe's presence just inches away. She could feel the heat from Chloe's body, a tangible warmth that seemed to call to her across the small divide. This was a new frontier of intimacy, one so far beyond the realm of their normal friendship that Maya felt completely unmoored, adrift in a sea of terrifying possibility. After several long, silent minutes, a small, shaky voice emerged from the darkness. "May?" "Yeah," Maya answered, her own voice hushed. "Thank you, there's nothing to thank me for," Maya said, and she meant it. Another stretch of silence followed. Maya thought Chloe might have fallen asleep, but then her voice came again, even quieter this time, so soft it was almost carried away by the stillness of the room. Will you just stay?" "Until I fall asleep." The plea was so simple, so drenched in a childlike vulnerability, that it cracked something open in Maya's chest. It wasn't a request from a friend to a friend. It was something more elemental. It was a cry for safety, for presence, for the simple, profound comfort of not being alone in the dark. "I'm not going anywhere," Maya whispered back to the darkness. "I'm right here," and as she lay there, listening to the sound of Chloe's breathing slowly deepen and even out into the steady rhythm of sleep, Maya knew that a line had been crossed. The carefully drawn map of their friendship had been rendered obsolete. They had stepped off the edge of it together, into a wild, unmarked landscape, and she had no idea where they were going or how they would ever find their way back. All she knew was that for the first time, it felt less like an exile and more like an expedition into a place that might, just might, one day feel like home. The days that followed Chloe's breakup with Liam were strange and formless, suspended in a kind of emotional amber. Chloe moved through their apartment like a ghost of herself, her usual vibrant energy muted to a low, sorrowful hum. She spent hours in her studio, not painting, but just sitting, staring at blank canvases as if the inspiration had been leached from her very bones. Maya became her silent caretaker, ensuring there was always a fresh pot of coffee, a warm meal she could coax Chloe into eating, a comforting presence that asked for nothing in return. The new boundary, or lack thereof, established that first night persisted. Chloe didn't return to her own bed. Every night, she would slip into Maya's room, a silent, unspoken ritual, and curl up on her side of the bed. They never spoke of it. It simply became their new normal. Maya's bed, once a solitary island, was now a shared space, a small raft adrift on a sea of uncertainty. Maya learned the specific weight and shape of Chloe's sleeping form, the soft sound of her breathing, the way she sometimes mumbled nonsense in her dreams. The proximity was a constant, low-grade torture. Maya would lie awake for hours, rigid with the effort of not reaching out, of not bridging the small, chaste gap between them. Her body hummed with a desperate, unspeakable longing, a physical ache for a touch she could not ask for. She felt like a starving person forced to sit at a banquet, forbidden to eat. The conversations, when they happened, were different now. They were quieter, more introspective. They took place late at night, propped up against pillows in Maya's bed, the room lit only by the soft glow of a single lamp. The talk was no longer about Liam or the specific failings of their relationship. Instead, Chloe began to ask bigger, more searching questions, as if the breakup had shaken loose the foundations of her entire worldview. One night, wrapped in the cozy intimacy of the lamplight, Chloe turned to her, her expression serious. "Do you think love is supposed to be easy?" she asked, her voice soft. "Or is it supposed to be work? Liam and I, we were always working." It felt like a constant negotiation, a series of compromises where we both ended up feeling like we'd lost something. Maya considered the question carefully. This was the territory she was supposed to navigate, offering sage, friendly advice. But the context had changed everything. They were in her bed. The air was thick with the scent of their mingled breathing. The honesty the situation demanded felt perilous. "I think," Maya began slowly, choosing her words with the precision of a bomb disposal expert, "that the relationship itself shouldn't be the work. Life is the work. The world is hard. The person you're with should be the place you rest from all of that. The work should be on yourselves, to be better for each other. But loving them? I think that part should be the easy part. The part that just is." Chloe was quiet for a long time, her eyes tracing the patterns on Maya's duvet. "The place you rest," she repeated, her voice a murmur. She looked up at Maya, and her gaze was so intense, so filled with a dawning, fragile understanding, that Maya's breath caught in her throat. "That's what this feels like," Chloe whispered. "With you. It feels like resting." The confession, so simple and yet so profound, landed in the center of Maya's chest like a warm, heavy stone. It was everything she had ever wanted to hear, and yet it was couched in the safe, ambiguous language of friendship. It was a beautiful, painful paradox. She was Chloe's safe harbor, her place of rest. But harbors were places ships left from, not where they stayed forever. As the weeks went on, the physical space between them began to shrink, not just at night, but during the day. Their casual touches, once fleeting and accidental, became more frequent and deliberate. A hand lingering on a shoulder. Fingers brushing as they reached for the same carton of milk in the fridge. One afternoon, as they sat on the sofa reading, Chloe's foot, clad in a fuzzy sock, nudged Maya's. Instead of moving it away, she left it there, a point of warm, steady contact that sent a cascade of sparks up Maya's leg. Maya's life became a study in hyper-awareness. She was attuned to every shift in Chloe's mood, every subtle change in her body language. She noticed the way Chloe's pupils would dilate slightly when she held her gaze for more than a few seconds. She noticed how Chloe seemed to unconsciously mirror her posture, leaning in when she leaned in, tilting her head at the same angle. These were small, insignificant details, the kind of things her rational mind told her she was inventing, projecting her own desperate hopes onto an innocent reality. But her heart, that foolish, stubborn organ, collected them like precious jewels, hoarding them as evidence for a case it was desperate to prove. The true seismic shift happened on a rainy Saturday evening. They had ordered pizza and decided on a movie marathon, a familiar comfort from their years of friendship. They were camped out on the sofa, buried under a mountain of blankets and pillows. Halfway through the second film, a slow, atmospheric drama, Chloe, who had been sitting propped against a pile of cushions, shifted. Without a word, without any warning at all, she slid down, turned, and rested her head in Maya's lap. The world stopped. Time seemed to freeze and fracture around the single, stunning point of contact. Chloe's head was a warm, living weight on her thighs. The scent of her shampoo, vanilla, and something floral filled Maya's senses. She could feel the soft silkiness of her hair against the worn denim of her jeans. Her entire body went rigid, every muscle tensing in a mixture of pure, unadulterated panic and dizzying, ecstatic joy. She stared down at the top of Chloe's head, at the auburn strands catching the flickering light from the television, and her mind went completely, utterly blank. Chloe let out a soft sigh of contentment, nuzzling her cheek against Maya's leg as if it were the most natural thing in the world. She adjusted herself slightly, getting comfortable, and then her body went still, her attention seemingly fixed on the movie playing out on the screen. For her, it was clearly nothing. A simple, friendly gesture. An act of casual intimacy between best friends who had already crossed so many other boundaries. For Maya, it was everything. It was a lit match dropped into a pool of gasoline. Her heart, which had been hammering, now seemed to be beating in slow, heavy thuds that echoed in her ears. She forced herself to breathe. In. Out. She rested her hands on the sofa on either side of her, her knuckles white, terrified that if she moved, if she even twitched, the spell would be broken. She wanted to touch her. The urge to run her fingers through Chloe's hair was so powerful it was a physical force, a magnetic pull that took every ounce of her willpower to resist. She didn't resist. Slowly, tentatively, as if moving through water, she lifted one hand. Her fingers trembled slightly as she lowered it, hovering for a breathless moment over Chloe's head. And then, she touched her. She let her fingers sink into the soft, thick strands of her hair. Chloe made a small, contented sound in the back of her throat and leaned into the touch, a subtle, almost imperceptible movement that was nonetheless a clear and unmistakable invitation. Emboldened, Maya began to gently, rhythmically stroke her hair, her fingers tracing slow, soothing patterns against her scalp. It was the most intimate thing she had ever done. It felt more significant than any kiss she had ever shared with anyone else, a quiet, sacred act of devotion. They sat like that for the rest of the movie, and then through another one after that. Neither of them spoke. The only sounds were the dialogue from the screen and the soft, steady rhythm of their breathing. For Maya, the world had shrunk to this single, perfect moment. The ache in her chest, the constant companion of her love for Chloe, was still there, but it had changed. It was no longer the sharp pain of longing, but a deep, resonant thrum of a feeling so immense it felt holy. She was touching the person she loved. And the person she loved was resting, safe and content, in her lap. As the credits of the third movie rolled up the screen, casting a pale, shifting light across the room, Chloe finally stirred. She didn't lift her head, but tilted it back to look up at Maya, her eyes soft and sleepy in the dim light. Her expression was unguarded, stripped of all pretense. "May," she murmured, her voice thick with impending sleep. Maya's own voice was a breathy, unsteady thing. Her hand had stilled in Chloe's hair. Chloe's gaze was searching, holding Maya's with a quiet, unnerving intensity. Her eyes flickered down, just for a heartbeat, to Maya's lips. Then they moved back up to meet her eyes again. The movement was so small, so fleeting, that Maya might have imagined it. But she knew she hadn't. It was a crack in the facade, a momentary glimpse of the churning, confused emotions that lay beneath Chloe's placid surface. "Nothing," Chloe whispered, breaking the gaze and turning her head to nestle back into Maya's lap. "Just, thanks for this," Maya couldn't speak. She just resumed her slow, gentle stroking of Chloe's hair, her heart a wild, hopeful, terrified thing in her chest. A question had been asked in that fleeting glance, a question that Chloe herself might not have even been aware of. And as Chloe drifted off to sleep in her lap, Maya was left with the deafening, terrifying silence of its answer, a truth that was becoming more and more impossible to ignore. Something fundamental had shifted between them. They were no longer just friends. And Maya had the sinking, exhilarating feeling that they could never go back. In the wake of that rainy Saturday, a new kind of tension began to thread itself through their days, a fine, shimmering wire pulled taut between them. The easy, unconscious intimacy had been replaced by a hyper-aware, deliberate closeness. Every touch, every shared glance, was now freighted with a new and terrifying significance. Maya felt as though she were walking on a tightrope, every movement requiring immense concentration to maintain her balance, to not give herself away. She started to pull back, just a little. It was an act of self-preservation, a desperate attempt to regain some semblance of control over her spiraling emotions. She began to spend more time at the library, feigning a sudden, intense interest in her graduate thesis. She took up jogging, pushing her body through miles of pavement to exhaust the nervous energy that coursed through her. She made excuses to avoid their now customary movie nights, claiming headaches or mountains of reading. She needed space. She needed air. The atmosphere in their apartment had become too charged, too thick with unspoken things, and she felt like she was suffocating. Her retreat did not go unnoticed. Chloe, emerging from the fog of her breakup, seemed to sense the shift immediately. She would watch Maya with a puzzled, wounded expression. The distance Maya was trying to create only seemed to make Chloe press closer, as if sensing Maya was slipping away and trying to hold on tighter. "You're avoiding me," Chloe said one evening, cornering Maya in the kitchen as she was making a hasty cup of tea before retreating to her room. There was no accusation in her voice, just a quiet, confused sadness. Maya's back was to her, but she could feel Chloe's gaze on her like a physical weight. She focused on pouring the hot water into her mug, her hand not quite steady. "I'm not," she lied, the word feeling like ash in her mouth. I'm really swamped with school." "No, it's more than that," Chloe insisted, her voice soft but firm. She took a step closer. Maya could feel her presence, the warmth of her, just behind her shoulder. "Ever since, for the last week or so, you've been different. Distant. Did I do something wrong?" "You did everything right," Maya's heart screamed. "You rested your head in my lap and you broke me." Maya turned around slowly, leaning back against the counter to put some space between them. She kept her eyes fixed on her mug, unable to meet Chloe's searching gaze. "Of course not, Chloe. You haven't done anything, then what is it?" Chloe pressed, her voice laced with a frustration that was clearly warring with her confusion. "Talk to me, May. We used to talk about everything. Now it feels like you're hiding from me, and I want to know why. What aren't you telling me?" The direct question was a spear, and it pierced straight through Maya's flimsy defenses. Her carefully constructed walls came tumbling down, and she was left standing in the ruins, exposed and terrified. She looked up and finally met Chloe's eyes. She saw the hurt there, the genuine bewilderment, and it was a gut punch. Her attempt to protect herself was only wounding the person she loved most in the world. Maya's resolve crumbled. She couldn't maintain the lie, not when confronted with Chloe's raw, honest pain. A wave of despair and resignation washed over her. She was so tired of hiding, so tired of the constant, exhausting effort of pretending. "I can't do this," Maya whispered, her voice cracking. She shook her head, a single, hot tear escaping and tracing a path down her cheek. "I can't." Chloe's expression softened instantly from frustration to alarm. "Can't do what?" "May, you're scaring me. What's going on?" She reached out, her hand hovering in the air for a moment before she rested it gently on Maya's arm. The touch was an anchor in Maya's swirling sea of panic. And then, the floodgates opened. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was a collapse. The words tumbled out of Maya, messy and desperate and completely unplanned. "I can't keep pretending. I can't sit next to you and have you touch me and act like it doesn't completely unravel me. I can't be the supportive friend who listens to you talk about your boyfriends when all I want to do is scream that it should be me. I can't have you sleep in my bed and not want to hold you. I can't." She was crying freely now, the tears she had held back for more than 2 years finally breaking free. She looked at Chloe's face, expecting to see shock or, worse, pity. She was prepared for the careful, gentle rejection, the awkward conversation about preserving their friendship. She was prepared for the end of everything. But that's not what she saw. Chloe's expression was one of stunned, dawning realization. Her hand was still on Maya's arm, her grip tightening slightly. Her mouth had parted in a small O of surprise, and her eyes, those beautiful hazel eyes, were wide with an emotion Maya couldn't begin to decipher. It wasn't pity. It wasn't disgust. It was recognition. "You," Chloe breathed, the word barely a whisper. "You're in love with me." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, a truth that had just been unearthed and was now lying between them, stark and undeniable. Maya couldn't speak. She just nodded, a fresh wave of tears blurring her vision. This was it. The point of no return. She had just detonated the bomb that would level the world they had built together. Chloe just stared at her, her mind clearly racing, connecting dots that had been scattered for years. Maya could almost see the memories replaying behind her eyes. Every late-night talk, every shared secret, every comforting hug, all of it suddenly cast in a new, brilliant, terrifying light. Chloe took a shaky breath, her gaze dropping to the floor as if she couldn't bear the intensity of the moment. "I broke up with Liam," she said, her voice quiet and strange. "I know," Maya whispered, confused by the non sequitur. "No," Chloe said, looking back up, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "You don't know why." She took another step closer, their bodies now only inches apart. The air between them crackled with a voltage that was almost unbearable. "I told myself it was because he didn't get me, because he didn't listen." And that was true. But it was more than that. The real reason is that he wasn't you." Maya's heart stopped. It just stopped. The world tilted on its axis. "Every time he disappointed me," Chloe continued, her voice gaining a desperate, confessional urgency, "my first thought was, Maya would understand. Every time I wanted to celebrate something, you were the first person I wanted to tell. Every time I felt lost or scared, you were the one I wanted to run to. You were my person." He was just the person I was with. She reached up with her other hand, her palm coming to rest on Maya's cheek. Her touch was featherlight, reverent. Her thumb stroked away a tear. "And all this time," she whispered, her voice thick with wonder and regret, "I was so blind. I didn't understand what I was feeling. I thought this was just what friendship felt like. But it's not, is it?" Maya shook her head, unable to form words. She was trapped in the raw, astonished hope in Chloe's eyes. "I've been so confused," Chloe went on, her gaze dropping to Maya's lips, and this time, it lingered. "There was no mistaking it. My world felt wrong, and I didn't know why. But when you pulled away, it was like the sun went out. And I finally understood. The thing that's been missing, it's been you all along." Her eyes met Maya's again, and they were filled with a terrifying, beautiful question. I've been thinking about kissing you," she confessed, her voice a raw whisper. "For weeks." Is that crazy?" The world came rushing back in a dizzying, euphoric wave. The air returned to Maya's lungs in a shuddering gasp. She was no longer falling, she was flying. The fear that had been her constant companion for years was suddenly, miraculously, gone, replaced by a hope so fierce and bright it was almost painful. "No," Maya breathed, her own hand coming up to cover Chloe's where it rested on her cheek. "It's not crazy," she had to tell her. She had to give her the whole truth, the weight of her love. "I've wanted to kiss you for 2 years, 4 months, and 12 days." A small, watery laugh escaped Chloe's lips. A single tear spilled from her eye and traced a path down her cheek, mingling with Maya's own. The sight of Chloe's tear, a tear of relief and recognition, was the most beautiful thing Maya had ever seen. The years of quiet pining, of secret aches and hidden hopes, all of it had led to this single, impossible moment. The confession wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. It was the key turning in a lock Maya hadn't even realized she was trapped behind. Chloe's face, illuminated by the soft light of the kitchen, was a study in profound, earth-shattering revelation. The confusion had melted away, replaced by a look of such tender, dawning certainty that it made Maya's heart ache with a new, unfamiliar kind of joy. It was the joy of being seen, truly and completely, for the first time. The years of silent devotion, of coded language and carefully measured affection had finally been translated. The love she had thought was a one-sided burden was now a shared, tangible thing, shimmering in the space between them. 2 years, Chloe whispered, the words filled with a soft, incredulous awe. She shook her head slightly, a small, sad smile playing on her lips. "Oh, May, all that time. You were right here, and I was so lost." The regret in her voice was palpable, but it was overshadowed by the sheer wonder of her discovery. It was as if she had been searching for a hidden treasure her whole life, only to find it had been in her own pocket all along. Her thumb, which had been resting on Maya's cheek, began to move, tracing the line of her jaw with a touch so gentle it was barely there. The light, caressing motion sent a fresh wave of shivers through Maya's entire body. Every nerve ending was alight, singing with a feeling that was part relief, part terror, and part a soaring, untethered euphoria. This was real. This was happening. Chloe's gaze, which had been locked on Maya's, softened even further. The last remnants of doubt seemed to dissolve, leaving only a clear, unwavering resolve. Her eyes held a question, a final, hesitant request for permission before they crossed the last frontier. "Can I?" she breathed, the words so soft they were more felt than heard. Her gaze flickered down to Maya's lips again, a clear declaration of her intent. Time seemed to slow to a crawl. Maya's entire universe contracted to the few inches of air that separated their faces. She could feel the warmth of Chloe's breath, smell the faint, familiar scent of vanilla and something uniquely, indefinably Chloe. Her heart was a frantic, wild thing, a hummingbird trapped in her chest. All the years of waiting, of dreaming of this exact moment, had not prepared her for the sheer, overwhelming reality of it. She couldn't find her voice. She could only nod, a small, jerky movement that conveyed all the hope and fear and longing that was crashing through her. It was all the answer Chloe needed. Chloe leaned in slowly, giving Maya every opportunity to pull away, to stop it. But Maya was rooted to the spot, her body thrumming with anticipation. Chloe's eyes fluttered shut, and then, finally, after an eternity of waiting, her lips met Maya's. The first touch was impossibly soft, a tentative, questioning brush of lips against lips. It was hesitant and shy, freighted with the weight of years of unspoken feelings and the terrifying newness of this moment. It wasn't a kiss of passion, not yet. It was a kiss of discovery, of asking and answering 1,000 silent questions at once. It tasted of salt from their tears and the sweet, familiar flavor of chamomile tea. A soft, wounded sound escaped Maya's throat, a sigh of surrender and relief that had been held captive for over 2 years. The sound seemed to break a spell. In response, Chloe's hand slid from Maya's cheek to the back of her neck, her fingers tangling in the short hairs at her nape. She tilted her head, and the kiss deepened. The initial tentativeness melted away, replaced by a sudden, urgent certainty. It was no longer a question, but a statement. A declaration. This was right. This was what had been missing. The pressure of Chloe's lips became firmer, more confident, and Maya responded in kind, her own hands coming up to frame Chloe's face, her thumbs stroking her soft cheeks. It was a kiss that was both a homecoming and a brand new adventure. It was the feeling of a key finally sliding into a lock that had been rusted shut for years, the tumblers clicking into place with a profound, satisfying finality. The world outside the circle of their embrace ceased to exist. There was no kitchen, no apartment, no past, no future. There was only the here and now, this single, perfect, incandescent moment. Maya poured every unspoken "I love you," every moment of quiet pining, every secret hope into that kiss. And she felt it all return to her, Chloe's own confusion and dawning realization and years of unconscious, misdirected affection finally finding their rightful home. When they finally broke apart, it was not a decision, but a necessity. The need for air was a harsh, unwelcome intrusion. They didn't move far. They rested their foreheads together, their breath mingling, their chests rising and falling in ragged, unsteady unison. Maya kept her eyes closed, trying to commit every single sensation of the last minute to memory. The softness of Chloe's lips, the feeling of her fingers in her hair, the overwhelming, soul-shattering relief. "Oh," Chloe breathed out, the word a soft puff of air against Maya's lips. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated wonder. "Wow." Maya opened her eyes. Chloe's were still closed, a small, blissful smile gracing her lips. She looked utterly transformed, as if she had just woken from a long, confusing dream and was finally seeing the world in color for the first time. "That felt," Chloe started, her voice a husky whisper, then trailed off, as if no word could adequately capture the feeling. "Yeah," Maya whispered back, her voice trembling. It did. Chloe finally opened her eyes, and the look in them was so full of love and awe and dawning joy that Maya felt her own eyes well up with fresh tears, but this time, they were tears of pure, unadulterated happiness. The blade that had been lodged beneath her ribs for so long was gone. The ache had vanished. In its place was a warmth that spread through her entire body, a feeling of wholeness she had never known was possible. They just stood there for a long moment, foreheads pressed together, simply breathing each other in, letting the reality of what had just happened settle over them. The silence was no longer tense or heavy with unspoken things. It was a comfortable, peaceful quiet, the kind of silence that exists only between two people who have finally, completely, found their way to each other. The journey had been long and painful, a winding path through a wilderness of uncertainty. But standing here, in the soft light of their shared kitchen, Maya knew, with a certainty that reached down to the very core of her being, that they were finally home. The immediate aftermath of the kiss was a strange and delicate dance. They untangled themselves slowly, as if reluctant to break the physical connection that had just been so profoundly forged. A new awareness hung in the air, a shimmering, fragile thing they were both afraid to break. They moved from the kitchen to the sofa, sitting close together, their knees touching, a silent affirmation that the proximity was now a given, a new and wonderful baseline. For a long time, neither of them spoke. They just sat, occasionally glancing at each other with shy, wondering smiles, like two people who had just witnessed a miracle and were still trying to process it. The silence was not awkward, it was reverent. It was the quiet space needed for their minds and hearts to catch up with the seismic shift that had just occurred. It was Chloe who finally broke it, her voice soft in the quiet room. "I'm scared," she admitted, her gaze fixed on her hands, which were twisting together in her lap. Maya's heart clenched, but not with fear. It was with a deep, resonant empathy. She reached out and took one of Chloe's restless hands in her own, her fingers intertwining with Chloe's. The fit was perfect. "Me too," Maya confessed, her voice equally quiet. "I'm terrified." Chloe looked up, her eyes wide and honest. "What does this mean? For us? What do we do now?" The questions were practical, necessary, but they were laced with an underlying panic, the fear of the unknown. They had just rewritten the entire constitution of their relationship, and now they had to figure out how to govern the new world they had created. Maya squeezed her hand, a small, reassuring pressure. "I don't know," she said, and the honesty of the admission felt grounding. "I don't have a map for this. I don't think one exists." She took a deep breath, marshaling the courage to say what she truly felt. "But for the first time in a very long time, I'm not scared of being lost. As long as I'm lost with you." A look of profound relief washed over Chloe's face. She leaned her head on Maya's shoulder, a gesture that was at once familiar and entirely new. It was no longer the act of a friend seeking comfort, it was the act of a partner seeking solace. "Okay," Chloe whispered into the fabric of Maya's shirt. "We can be lost together." They sat in comfortable silence again, the fear acknowledged and set aside, for now. Maya could feel the gears turning in Chloe's mind, the quiet processing of years of memories through this new, revelatory lens. "It all makes so much sense now," Chloe murmured after a while, her voice muffled by Maya's shoulder. She lifted her head to look at Maya, her expression one of dawning, almost comical, realization. "All those times I complained to you about Liam, about how he never seemed to know what I needed, how he never really saw me." She paused, shaking her head in disbelief at her own obliviousness. "It was never about him," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "Not really. I was measuring him against you. The whole time. I was measuring every relationship I've ever had against what I had with you, and they all came up short. I didn't know that's what I was doing." The confession was a balm on a wound Maya hadn't even realized was still open. The years she had spent as the supportive friend, listening to Chloe's relationship woes, had always carried a sting of inadequacy, a feeling that she was the perpetual runner-up. To hear that, in reality, She had always been the gold standard, the benchmark against which all others were judged. It was a validation so profound it almost brought her to tears again. "I would listen to you," Maya admitted, her voice thick with emotion, "and I would do that. I would listen. I would just be there. I thought I was just thinking it. But you were feeling it." "I was," Chloe confirmed, her eyes shining. "I felt safe with you. I felt seen. I just had it all filed under the wrong category in my head. Best friend, I never thought to look in that file for the label that said love of my life." The phrase, love of my life, so casually and yet so certainly spoken, stole the air from Maya's lungs. It was a fantasy she had entertained in her most private, daring daydreams, but to hear it spoken aloud, by Chloe, was a shock to her system. They talked for hours after that, the conversation flowing easily, a torrent of pent-up confessions and rediscovered memories. They recontextualized their entire history together. The trip they took to the coast 2 summers ago, where they had shared a bed to save money, and Maya had lain awake all night, acutely aware of Chloe's breathing. The time Chloe had been sick with the flu and Maya had cared for her for 3 days straight, and Chloe had said, half delirious with fever, "You're better than any boyfriend." Every memory was a puzzle piece that now, finally, fit. As the first pale light of dawn began to creep through the window, painting the room in soft shades of gray and pink, a comfortable exhaustion settled over them. They had talked themselves out, laid their souls bare. "We should probably get some sleep," Maya said, though the thought of leaving this bubble of perfect understanding was almost painful. Chloe nodded, but she didn't move. Instead, she tightened her grip on Maya's hand. "Can we just stay here?" she asked, her voice small. "On the sofa?" "I don't want to be a room away from you right now, okay?" Maya agreed without hesitation. They shifted, rearranging the pillows and blankets, and curled up together on the small sofa. It was a tight fit, but neither of them cared. Chloe tucked herself against Maya's front, her back pressed to Maya's chest, her head nestled in the crook of Maya's neck. Maya wrapped her arms around Chloe, holding her close, her hand resting over Chloe's heart. She could feel its steady, rhythmic beat against her palm. This was so different from the nights they had shared a bed in chaste, agonizing silence. There was no gap between them now, no unspoken tension. There was only a profound sense of peace, of rightness. Maya rested her chin on the top of Chloe's head, inhaling the scent of her hair, and closed her eyes. The fear was still there, a small, quiet hum in the background, a whisper of the challenges that lay ahead. But for the first time, the hope was louder. The love was louder. As she drifted off to sleep, held in the arms of the woman she loved, who, miraculously, loved her back, Maya knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. They had found their way through the darkness. Now, they would learn to navigate the light. 3 months later, the world felt like it had been repainted in brighter colors. The fear and uncertainty that had clouded the first few days and weeks after their confession had slowly dissipated, like morning mist burning off in the sun. They had navigated the initial awkwardness, the fumbling first steps of transforming a deep-rooted friendship into a romantic partnership, with a mixture of open communication, gentle patience, and a surprising amount of laughter. The apartment, once a stage for Maya's quiet pining, was now a sanctuary of shared joy. The air was lighter, filled with the easy intimacy of a couple who had found their natural rhythm. The silence between them was no longer a space to be filled with anxieties, but a comfortable, shared peace. It was a home in a way it had never been before. This morning was a perfect example of their new normal. Maya woke up slowly, not to the sound of an alarm, but to the feeling of soft sunlight on her face and the gentle weight of Chloe's arm draped across her waist. They were in her bed, which had, by unspoken agreement, become their bed, tangled together in the sheets. Chloe was still asleep, her face relaxed and peaceful, her auburn hair a fiery halo on the white pillowcase. Maya lay still, not wanting to disturb her, and just watched her breathe. It was her favorite new pastime. She studied the dusting of freckles across Chloe's nose, the gentle curve of her lips, the way her eyelashes fanned out against her cheeks. A feeling of overwhelming love and gratitude washed over her, so potent it was almost dizzying. For 2 years, she had woken up with an ache in her chest. Now, she woke up with this. It felt like a miracle she would never get used to. She carefully slipped out of bed, Chloe murmuring in her sleep at the loss of warmth. Maya padded into the kitchen, the familiar floorboards creaking under her feet. She started making coffee, the rich, dark aroma filling the small apartment. The motions were automatic, a morning ritual, but everything about it felt different. She was no longer making coffee for her roommate, she was making it for her girlfriend. The words still sent a thrill through her every time she thought it. My girlfriend. As the coffee maker gurgled its final, satisfying sigh, she felt a pair of arms slide around her waist from behind, and a soft cheek press against her back. Morning, Chloe mumbled, her voice thick with sleep. Maya leaned back into the embrace, her hands coming up to rest on Chloe's arms. Morning, sleepyhead, you left me, Chloe accused, her tone playfully wounded. The bed was cold, I was performing a vital public service, Maya said, turning in Chloe's arms to face her. She reached up and brushed a stray strand of hair from Chloe's forehead. It's called making coffee so my girlfriend doesn't turn into a monster, Chloe laughed, the sound warm and lovely. A valid point. She leaned in and kissed Maya, a slow, sweet morning kiss that tasted of sleep and affection. It was a kiss that still felt like a gift, a privilege Maya would never take for granted. They stood like that for a moment, wrapped in each other's arms in the sun-drenched kitchen, simply existing in their newfound peace. The ghost of Liam had long since been exorcised. He was now just a footnote in their story, the catalyst that had inadvertently set them on the right path. Their friends had accepted the shift in their relationship with a collective, knowing, well, it's about time. It turned out their epic, secret love story had been painfully obvious to everyone but the two people living it. Chloe pulled back slightly, her hazel eyes, so clear and bright in the morning light, searching Maya's. What are you thinking about? She asked softly. Maya smiled. I was just thinking about how different everything is, she admitted. How for so long, this apartment felt like a waiting room. And now it feels like the destination. A look of profound tenderness crossed Chloe's face. She reached up and cupped Maya's cheek, her thumb stroking her skin. I'm sorry it took me so long to get here, she said, her voice earnest. I'm sorry for all the time we lost. Maya shook her head, leaning into the touch. We didn't lose it, she said, her voice firm with a certainty that had been hard-won. We were building the foundation. All those years of friendship, of learning each other inside and out, that's why this works. That's why this feels so solid. We didn't skip the first 20 chapters of the book. We just didn't realize it was a love story until the end. Chloe's eyes welled up slightly, a testament to the deep well of emotion that now lived so close to her surface. You always know exactly what to say, she whispered, the words echoing that long-ago night on the sofa, but now they were imbued with an entirely new meaning. I love you, Maya said, the words as easy and natural as breathing. I love you, too, Chloe replied, her voice thick. She leaned in for another kiss, this one deeper, filled with all the gratitude and history and bright, beautiful promise of their future. Later, they sat on the sofa, mugs of coffee in hand, the comfortable silence stretching between them. Chloe's latest painting, a vibrant, joyful abstract piece that was a world away from her moody, introspective work from before, was propped against the far wall, a testament to her newfound happiness. She was no longer searching for a missing piece, she was whole. They both were. Maya looked at Chloe, who was gazing out the window, a small, contented smile on her face as she watched the city wake up. She thought about the long, winding path that had brought them to this simple, perfect morning. The years of quiet pain, the terrifying vulnerability of her confession, the breathtaking relief of being loved in return. It had been a journey of 1,000 tiny, terrifying steps across a chasm of fear and uncertainty. But they had made it to the other side. She understood now that some homes were not 4 walls and a roof, but a person. A safe harbor. A place of rest. They were built not of bricks and mortar, but of shared laughter, and quiet understanding, and the simple, profound comfort of a hand to hold in the dark. She looked at Chloe, her Chloe, laughing softly at something she saw on the street below, her face bathed in the golden morning light, and she knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that she was, finally and completely, home.